And there we are. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. Announcement right off the bat, in case this bothers anyone, this session is being recorded. And what we do with those recordings, as you may see here on our title slide, is we do put those up on our YouTube channel for members to refer to later. We're sharing a lot of information that I find to be very useful. You'll see a couple presentations on women's uniforms up there, as well as cultural Coast Guard mutual assistance and some others. And so before I turn things over to Diane, I'd just like to take an opportunity, a couple minutes here, to talk about WLI for those who may not be familiar with us, as well as provide some updates as to where the organization is going. So first, what is the U.S. Coast Guard Women's Leadership Initiative? It is a group made up of women and men who are in the Coast Guard, whether they are active, reserve, civilian, or auxiliary, and have an interest in the recruiting, retention, and professional development of women in the Coast Guard. And this can mean a wide variety of things. They promote women, the issues that impact them, represent them, provide some advocacy for them, as well as assist with communication up and down chains of leadership with senior leaders. We empower women to speak up for what is they need to be successful in careers, provide networking, and then some resources of mentoring and coaching. So all those things that help women be successful and be able to assume leadership roles in the Coast Guard. We are partners with senior leadership, but we do not report to senior leadership. And that's important because sometimes members come to us with some sensitive issues that we need to find discrete ways of finding answers to. And so who is a member of WLI? Well, everyone. We are first and foremost a leadership group. All of our activities are open to all members. We are not exclusive. I did receive several questions as I was preparing for tonight's event about, well, who is this for? Who can come? So we, and the hope is that everyone benefits from these events that we have. So some of the benefits and why we formed an auxiliary chapter. It gives us access to support from the Coast Guard Alumni Association for the activities. They provide the license for the templates and the website that we use to create those awesome looking flyers. They administer grants, especially like these program support awards, which through the auxiliary chapter, if you have an activity that you're wanting to do to support women in leadership, and you need some funding to do that, we can help you get that. It provides mentorship opportunities as well as access to Coast Guard leadership on issues impacting our women. And these are wide ranging. On the active duty side, this is anywhere from trying to make women's combo covers more cost effective for our members, all the way to making sure that the needs of nursing mothers are met in the workplace. So it's a wide range of issues. Some of the activities that you've seen out of our chapter so far include town hall meetings. And this picture on the right, as confusing as it may look, is the result of those town hall meetings, where my leadership team got together and we brainstormed on themes that came out of those meetings in ways that we can take action based on those themes. We've had a couple of presentations on uniforms, including a general presentation which kicked off our chapter in February of 2021. So we're not quite 2 years old yet. Accessorizing those uniforms, because there's a lot of those little details, right down to the size of earrings that we're allowed to wear. And then we also helped to draft an ALOX that went out clarifying to our members the applicability of various uniform boards that had made changes to women's uniform items. We had invited Rear Admiral Saunders Stokes to come talk to us about what it was like being the first woman to break some of these barriers and be leadership of various different components of the Coast Guard. Parliamentary procedure. We've talked about the leadership series, including OXLAMs, ALOC, and some of those others. We had input into the strategic plan that Commodore Formato asked us to give, so that he can make sure that his team is looking out for the needs of our women, as well as providing information on the Coast Guard and mutual assistance. So some future activities and where we're looking at going in these next couple of years. We are looking to expand. We've talked about formalizing an organizational structure, and as part of that, we will be looking for people who are willing to serve in roles such as leadership and programming, policy, developing a mentorship program, and as well as some fellowship activities that help provide that networking and relationship component to WLI. I will be putting out some some requests for people to step up and volunteer for those. And we don't quite know what that's going to look like yet. There's a lot of things that will be in play, including diversity of geography. Right now, the people who are serving on my leadership team are very concentrated in the East, and we want to make sure that people in the West are represented as well. Diversity and longevity of service, making sure that we get newer members as well as more senior members involved as well, and a couple of other considerations there. We're looking at approaching some of the more difficult topics: unconscious bias, social conditioning, some of the research that is being done surrounding diversity, items like that, stuff that is a little bit more on the uncomfortable side to talk about. It may give some people some icky feelings, but they're important topics, as well as looking to see how we can implement some more interactive activities, book groups, podcast groups, moderated discussions, things like that. And so how can you be involved? We do have a mailing list. Notices for looking for people to fulfill those needs with the programming and this other side I just talked about. We'll go out to that mailing list first, as well as onto our Facebook. So like our Facebook page, sign up for that mailing list so that we can tap you to volunteer. If you have a topic that you specialize in that you think we should be putting out there to our members, we would love it if you would step up and say, "Hey, Julie, can I please present on this to our membership?" And the answer is going to be absolutely, as long as it fits within the mission of the WLI. Promote these events, share this information, and build intentional relationships with women across the country. And so with that, that's all that I have about WLI. And so you all received Diane's wonderful biography on the flyer. So just to kind of briefly introduce you, Diane Erisman is our speaker tonight. She is a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Missouri. She is member of 8th Western Division 3, and she's an incoming district captain for her district. So with that, Diane, I'll let you further introduce yourself.
Okay.
And if you want to share your screen, I will stop sharing mine.
Okay. Okay. Can I? Okay. Oops. Okay. Got to go to the beginning. Okay. Okay. First of all, I would like to thank Julie for inviting me to give this presentation. And like Julie said, we're in the same district. We're not in the same division, but we're in the same district. And I can attest that anything Julie touches, she touches with excellence. So I want to give a big shout out to Julie for all the great things she does and for doing it with such a good job. And I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. And hopefully you will get something out of it. Now I go on and introduce myself again. Again, my name's Diane Erisman. I'm in Division 3, and I am an incoming district captain. But when I am not in the auxiliary, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And for those of you who are not familiar with the mental health profession in this country, licensed clinical social worker is someone who's gotten a graduate degree and then done postgraduate work and then taken state boards to become licensed. And once you become a licensed clinical social worker, I can diagnose someone, treat someone, and then if I'm a provider for their insurance company, I can bill their insurance company and they will pay me. And I've spent many years billing insurance companies. I have over 35 years experience. I've worked for the government. I've worked in hospitals. I ended my career in a school system. I was a field instructor at Washington University, and I've had a private practice. So I've had most of my adulthood has been spent doing mental health. Now, so today we're going to talk about stress management. And I first became interested in stress management 22 to 25 years ago when the Army and the Air Force were looking for mental health professionals that they could train to implement some of their strategies in critical incident stress, what they call critical incident stress management. And the military does a lot of research in stress management. And as you go through here, I'll probably be, as we go through this, I'll be referring to various research things. But back then, whenever someone was introduced to a critical incident, then they were required to go through some stress management afterwards. The critical incidents usually then involved combat. So if someone had been in combat for a certain length of time, they had to go through some stress management. In theory, it was really a good practice, and they thought it was going to start reducing post-traumatic stress disorders, but they found it didn't. So they scrapped that whole program because there wasn't a basis for it. So that is essentially how I got interested in stress management, and I continued that interest through my career. Okay, so I have to move this. We can't escape stress, so we need to manage or reduce the stress because too much stress can be harmful and it can lead to burnout. We hear about stress all the time. Most people now take it seriously, but sometimes people don't take it that seriously. So in this presentation, what we're going to look at is what is stress, how does stress affect the body, what situations cause stress, how do humans behave to stressors, how does stress affect the mental health and behavior, why is relieving stress important, and then most importantly, which most of you are probably here for, how do I relieve that stress? Okay. Now, if anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to stop. We've only got about 30 on here, so feel free to stop. However, at the end, we'll have some time for question, comments, discussions. But keep in mind, this is going to be about an hour, so the longer you talk, the longer it gets. So, according to the World Health Organization, stress is a significant problem of our times, and it affects both the physical and mental health of a person. They've identified stress as the second most frequent health problem in Europe, and it impacts 1/3 of employed people in the European Union. So what is stress? Stress is a situation or perceived situation that threatens a person's psychological and physical equilibrium. And equilibrium is necessary for healthy functioning. Remember, stress is a destabilizer. It is a catalyst for health problems because it messes with that person's optimal state of balance, and that's called the homeostasis. So that's what stress does. Now, I've got two interesting words here, perceived situation. And so it doesn't mean you actually have to be in that situation. And I'm going to use myself as an example because for 1 year I worked under a very toxic boss. She had a narcissistic personality disorder and a lot of paranoia. And that paranoia, she thought people were always talking about her. In one instance, someone was trying to give away their elliptical machine, and not elliptical, their treadmill. And they said, I just want to get rid of it. Well, she heard get rid of, and she assumed they were talking about her. And she said, they're talking about me. I said, no, they're talking about getting rid of a treadmill. No, she was determined it was her. And then as the year went on, she kept overhearing such conversations, thinking they were talking about her. Now, just a couple weeks ago, I ran into her, and she is now under treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder. And I said, what happened? And she said, well, everybody was talking about me. Well, I know they weren't, but she actually talked herself into having a post-traumatic stress disorder by thinking everyone was talking about her. And that is what is meant by perceived situation, because that is recognized that some people do that. So it can be perceived. Okay. So when we have stress, our nervous system responds to stressors by triggering a range of physiological changes, such as the release of stress hormones. That causes that change in the equilibrium, that homeostasis I was talking about, within the body, and then that creates physical problems. Okay, so this is going to sum up what we're going to eventually talk about. So you'll see toxic supervisor, because I experienced that. I will refer to that frequently. But stressful events can be a lot of different things. It can be, and I'll refer to the auxiliary. It can be conflict within a flotilla, problems with a problem member in a flotilla, car accident, boat accident, interpersonal conflict. So stressful events, and we'll talk, there are a lot more than that, but so here's a stressful event. Now here's this person's interpretation. The person's interpretation of that event is influenced by their familiarity with the stressful situational stress and their knowledge of how to handle it. Okay, then that is going to lead psychologically to emotional reactions, which can be on the negative side, anxiety, frustration, anger, fear. On the cognitive side, it can be decreased performance. On the physiological side, it can be your increased heart rate, your sweaty palms, your dry mouth, high blood pressure, digestive problems. But let's go back to this person's individual interpretation, because that is going to be very unique. And what I think is a stressor, someone else may not think of as stressful, or vice versa. And one perfect example I have is my friend, son is a Navy SEAL right now. And he does not like to be in family situations or things like Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas dinners. So one time I asked him, I said, why are you so uncomfortable in a Thanksgiving dinner where you know you're safe, no one's going to bomb the house, no one's going to shoot at you? And he said, I don't know how to handle small talk. I don't know how to handle things with people in social settings. And I said, where are you most comfortable? Surprisingly, he said, I'm most comfortable in the back of a C-130, going to do a halo drop or jump, which is high altitude, low opening, over a body of water. He said, that is where I feel like I belong. That is what I know. That is where I'm comfortable. I know my job. So now, if you put me in the back of a C-130 and told me I had to jump out of it, I would have a heart attack. You would have a dead body laying there. I would not think that was relaxing. But to him, what I consider relaxing, he considered stressful, and vice versa. So it really is a person's interpretation. Now, in stress, we have two things. We have short-term stress and we have long-term stress. Short-term stress is that one-time event that is not repetitious. Okay, a car cuts you off. We've all been through that. Your heart, when you see that car cut you off, you think you might hit it, you have to swerve, your heart rate increases, you breathe more rapidly. You may or may not voice your opinion to the discourteous driver in a loud manner. You may make a hand gesture. People do lots of things. But ultimately, that situation resolves quickly and no harm has been done to you or your car. However, short-term stressors can teach us a lot of things. I'll use an example. My husband and I used to be very active in patrols. And one time we were doing training, and I had a person working on their boat crew, and they took the helm, which is required to get, at that time, to get signed off on their PQS. And when we were going up to take a stern tow into side tow, and then as he started approaching the boat, he throttled forward as hard as he could. The boat was going, and it's, we're speeding up. I'm looking at the other boat with my husband standing on it, envisioning us hitting it. I yell at him to stop, and he said no. So I reached over to pull the throttle back, which he did. I turned the wheel and we were all right. And I said, what were you doing? And his response is like, well, I'm going to show you that I can maneuver in close quarters. I can maneuver a fast moving boat. So we had to discuss that. And then from then on, when someone else would get on my boat, if they were taking the helm and I did not know them, I stood behind them ready to grab that throttle, ready to grab the wheel. So I learned from that short-term stressor. So short-term stressors can be good. We can learn things that can benefit us from them. And I'm sure all of you have examples of that. Okay, but now we're going to talk about the long-term stress. It's repeated or chronic activation of our body's stress response. It can be a serious threat to our mental and physical well-being. And that's where the problems start coming in. Now, sometimes people are more, again, stress, like I said earlier, is individual. What stresses me may not stress you. And then some people are more vulnerable to that. And sometimes the age, their genetics, their life experiences, coping mechanisms, and their social support system. And I want you to keep that in the back of your mind. Social support system all contribute to how they're going to respond to stress. And there's been a lot of research done on why some people respond well to stress and others don't. So those are all the things. So then also with the long-term stress, over time, the stress hormones like epinephrine and cortisone, eventually they stop helping us and they become destructive to our bodies. Being in a constant state of stress increases strain on our hearts, suppresses our immune system, and increases inflammation. So how do you respond to stress? Would anybody like to give a few examples of how they respond to stress? Obviously, this guy's pulling his hair out, yelling. Okay.
Overeat.
Overeat. Oh, me too. Me too. I overeat. Anyone else?
I'll pipe in here.
Okay.
I was, I guess, a little feedback, hoping that this would maybe resonate with me. I've heard a lot of this before. I have a psychology background.
Okay.
But my recent stress has been the death of my husband, who is also an exhilarist.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
There's nothing like it. I mean, there's just nothing like it. And that's all I got to say.
Oh, Beth, I'm so very sorry. And that is probably the worst stress anyone can go through. It really is. And I'm just so sorry to hear that. Anyone else want to mention something on stress?
One of my typical responses to stress is the doom scrolling through social media.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Are you looking for healthy options?
Could be healthy. We're going to talk about healthy, so.
I mean, I have a tendency to play those dumb little match 3 games on my phone because it's mindless. It just takes your mind off of it. So.
You're right. You're right. Okay, so here's some various responses to stress. And we're eventually going to talk about those healthy responses. And I did not list those mind-numbing games. And I do that too. I do. So here's some things. Worrying, overthinking problems. Now, I am the queen of overthinking problems. I will think about the same problem, and I will recycle the same thoughts. Unfortunately, I get stuck in those thoughts, and I try very hard to think of something different, but I get stuck. Some people are irritable. Some people have a quick temper, memory problems, concentration problems, anxiety, difficulty making decisions, losing interest in family and friends. Then on the physical side, that's going to cause high blood pressure, increased heart rate, frequent colds, shortness of breath, muscle spasm, changes in sleep, digestive problems, back and shoulder pain, and we could go on and on. Insomnia, lots of things. Now, a study done in the past 10 years in the United Kingdom found that 73% of the participants, and this was a rather large study, they had about 5,000 participants, random, and 47% of them said they got angry and their temper flared up. 43% of them overate, then they were emotional eaters, which I too am. Then from there, about 30% some cried, and then some drank. So those were how they handled that. So the other thing that stress affects us in the work world, the job concentration is disrupted. And why that is significant is because it takes, research shows it takes a person 30 minutes to regain their train of thought after being disrupted. The self-initiative is reduced. Trust in others is diminished. Resentment, depression, and burnout. All of these things also contribute to stress. So we need to know our warning signs. If we keep pushing and we don't look at the red flags and the warning signs our body is telling us, we're going to have damage done. So pay attention to the warning signs, the red flags, when you feel your heart rate rising, when you feel you see your blood pressure going up. For me, when I start knowing I'm overeating, my husband knows I'm stressed out when he sees me overeating. If you have digestive problems, some people have digestive problems, your immunity is decreased. Sleep disturbances. Stress will cause me to get insomnia and constant worry. When that happens, you know that you're doing some permanent damage. And the physical health conditions that these things cause is a cardiovascular disease. The high blood pressure causes hypertension, obesity, digestive system problems, decreased immunity leads to illnesses, insomnia, and depression. So let's talk about some of the situations that cause stress. Would anybody like to talk about some situations that they've encountered? We know the death of a loved one is always number one. That can be a spouse, it can be a child. A death of any loved one, a death of a good friend. Those are situations that cause stress. Anything else someone would like to talk about?
I have a teenager.
That is definitely stressful. Yes, that is stressful. Anything else?
Being on the Missouri River at night doing ATON patrols.
That's also very stressful. I've patrolled on the Missouri River up here, and the current is wicked. And at night, it is dark.
You know, moving, like changing homes or changing jobs.
Yeah, changing jobs.
Too many jobs within the auxiliary that you're responsible for, and that people look to you for answers all the time.
That is very stressful, and I do have that listed.
Last minute deadlines from the Coast Guard.
Last minute deadlines. Yeah.
I'm big at last minute deadlines. You can give me 3 weeks, but 5 days before I'm working on it.
But that creates more stress.
Right.
It really does.
But that's a habit. I do know that.
Okay, so some situations, I've got several situations here. Toxic boss. For me, it's a toxic boss. Continually working long hours. And this is interesting. In our flotilla, we had a fellow. He's now transferred up to 9th District. But he was finishing his residency at Washington U Medical School and through our Barnes hospital here, and he's emergency room doctor. So back in 2020, when everything was shut down for COVID, we had a flotilla meeting, and he's in the doctor's lounge. And it was really interesting because we started talking about Lake of the Ozarks, one of our prominent lakes here in our district that has a lot of issues. And we're talking about the people down there, and thousands of people got there for a boat race. And people were not practicing any social distancing. And all of a sudden, through the Zoom, we could see his body tighten up, his face muscles tighten up. His chest was moving, like he was breathing hard, and his voice went up, and he started speaking very quickly. And he started talking about how angry he was because he had worked 6 weeks straight without a day off. His wife is a nurse. She had worked 6 weeks straight without a day off. He had done sleeping at the hospital. He talked about the problems with COVID, and he felt that people weren't respecting the medical professionals because they weren't taking care of themselves. And we could see the tension in him. And he then apologized for that display of stress. But that stress of that continually working those long hours without a break really affected him. Within the auxiliary, a problem person in your flotilla or division, having to do your job and everyone else's. I think, Marilyn, you've probably experienced some of that sometimes. Disrespect by superiors or subordinates, that would be more the work world. Hopefully we don't experience that in the auxiliary. Meeting requirements, those, like Marilyn said, she can work well under pressure. 5 days, give her 5 days and she can get it done. Finances, some other things on the more emotional side, broken promises, hectic schedules, angry verbal exchanges, abusive management, job loss, betrayal, and situations over which we actually have no control. Sometimes those are very stressful. Now, a study in the United States found that the most common stressors people identified with were relationships at work. That was where they had the most stress. Then they felt overworked, trying to balance their work and their life. And they felt stress in trying to find meaningful activities in their life. And that was something interesting that they found. Okay, so now let's talk burnout. In May 2019, the World Health Organization formally recognized burnout as an occupational hazard. They've defined burnout as a state of continued mental and physical fatigue caused by persistent stressors. Hence, going back to the doctor in our flotilla, that is what he was feeling. He was experiencing burnout, and we were seeing the results of that burnout. So what are some indications of burnout? So when a person is, and again, each person's going to display different emotions for burnout, but here's some things that some people may be feeling: a loss of meaning in one's work, mental, emotional, or physical exhaustion. That's what our doctor felt. Feeling reduced personal accomplishment with their job, a desire to run from the situation, possible hypervigilance, isolation from others, loss of interest in pleasurable activities, and that zombie state of staring straight ahead and doing nothing. My last job, I worked in a very contemporary building, and one wall of my office was total glass. In fact, all of our offices had a wall of glass, so everybody could look into everyone else's office. And I'm sitting in my office looking across the hall at my friend, who is a psychologist, and she's sitting there staring straight ahead. And I watch her for 2 hours. She stares straight ahead and does nothing. So finally I went over and I said, Jana, what in the world is going on? And she said, I can't do this. I don't know what I'm going to do. I just want to leave. I want to leave here. I want to go home. I want to get in bed, and I just don't want to come out. Now, and so she said, she also didn't want to be around anyone else. I said, well, you want to talk about it? She goes, no, I don't want to be around anybody. I just don't want to do anything. I can't do this anymore. So she was wanting to isolate herself from others, which really did impact me because she and I usually had lunch together every day. She wanted to run from the situation. She was she was emotionally, mentally exhausted, and she was burnt out. So another form of burnout may be the person who reacts more intensely to normal ups and downs of life. Something that normally they would not get mad at, they get mad at. They take their frustrations out on others. They might blame others for the problems. They get easily angry. Doctor in our flotilla normally would not have been angry at talking about how the people were interacting down at the Lake of the Ozarks, but it did make him angry. One time when I was in graduate school, I worked my way through graduate school, so I was always working and then going to school. So one day, but I was sitting at home, made myself a tuna salad sandwich, and anyone who has any cat owners out here, cat parents will identify with this. And I leave to go get something to drink, get a soda to bring it back. And when I get back, I find my cat on the table who has taken the bread off the top of my tuna salad and is sitting there eating my entire tuna salad sandwich. Well, normally a normal person would get the cat off and say something to the cat, but no, I burst out crying. I sat on the floor and I cried my eyes out while I watched the cat totally finish my sandwich and then get down quite happy about that. So that was not a normal reaction to a normal up and down, a normal situation that any cat mom or dad's going to experience. So that is an example. So we start overreacting to normal situations. So now we know how we react with some of these situations. And why is relieving stress necessary? Well, the Mayo Clinic claims we should immediately manage our stress because if we don't, we're going to end up with it's going to damage our health, our relationships, and our quality of life. So we need to immediately deal with it. Okay. So let's move this. Are you over-revving because of stress? How are you handling your stress? So I want you to just quietly think about this past week. Think about something that caused you stress. How did you handle it? And did you try to relieve it? So just take a couple minutes and think about that. Okay. Because if we are getting stress in, we need to immediately deal with it. Okay, now what's happening with my PowerPoint? Okay, now we're going to talk about stress relief. Oops. Okay. We're going to start this on emotional support system for stress reduction. An emotional support system is a protective system that leads people to believe that they are cared for and loved, esteemed, and a member of a network of a mutual obligation. By that I mean they know that they're cared for and that they're going to care for others within this network. It's an interactive, balanced network. And it is very important to do this. There's been research done from the Taiwanese Army all through several universities in the U.S. that this is one of the most critical aspects of handling stress is the emotional support system. It's very interesting, just a little, because I love history, so I usually weave in something about history and whenever I'm talking. My husband's father and his uncle were in the Battle of the Bulge. They hit Normandy with Patton's 9th Army Air Corps and followed him through Europe all the way to Berlin. And when they took Berlin, now these guys were under intense battles and combat. and had horrible living situations. But it was interesting when the two of them came back, we never saw, they didn't talk much about what happened. They would talk to each other, but not us. But they didn't seem to have any post-traumatic stress. But then as I talked to, especially his uncle who talked about it, because his uncle said that the people in his battalion were so close, the men were so close, they talked to each other so much, they helped each other so much, they cared about each other so much, that they felt like they were part of this group. That group was so strong that for the next, every year until they all died, they still, every summer, got together for a reunion. And when one of them needed something, they all still helped this group. It was incredible the emotional ties these people had. And that was probably because they had that emotional stress system there. So after a battle, they had their people who just went through it and they could talk to. So, the research is showing that that is absolutely critical to have that. Now, it doesn't have to be necessarily your family. It could be your coworkers. It can be your family. It could be someone in your flotilla. It could be a small group. It doesn't have to be a large group, but you've just got to have that emotional support system. And you have to be able to talk about what you're doing. Okay, so let's now move on to some other aspects of trying to resolve this stress. So one thing that I know everybody has probably heard about is that simple breathing exercise. So you have to remember that when you get stressed out, you have rapid, shallow, erratic breathing. That's very common. But we need to have slow, deep, regular breathing and is a sign of relaxation. So we've all heard this. You breathe in slowly, exhale. When you exhale, think about relaxing. Do this 5 to 10 times. So when you're starting to feel stressed, stop and do the breathing. I think we've heard about that a lot. Okay, 2 other things that research is showing helps with stress is sleep. Getting that amount of sleep. There's a lot of research going on now with sleep, and that's incredibly important. Getting the mind around sleep and also exercise. Because exercise, aerobic exercise releases those endorphins, and the endorphins are mood elevators, so you need the exercise. A lot of research. Even during the COVID, the American Psychological Association did some research on exercise and said it's one of the most effective ways of reducing stress. Okay, another one is say no to alcohol. Alcohol is a depressant. And like I said, I've been in the mental health field for over 35 years, and I've worked with a variety of clients. And anyone that works in the mental health field will have at one point worked with people who have alcohol or drug problems. And it is a depressant. It does not, it really is. So if you're feeling stressed out and if you're having issues, best bet is to say no to alcohol. Okay. Another thing is to set practical goals and expectations for dealing with situations and solving problems, and also making your expectations of others realistic. So when we have a lot, and in the auxiliary, a lot of times we do carry multiple hats. A lot of times we are trying to do a lot of different jobs, but we have to have practical goals for those jobs and expectations for ourselves. And sometimes we push ourselves. We think, oh, if I just sign up and I want to do the OXOP, I want to get my crew, and I want to do all these things all at once, that's not realistic. And then we're setting ourselves up for failure, because then when we aren't getting it done, we can become stressed out. Or when something else is happening and there's stress, then that adds to our stress. Also, make your expectations of others realistic. That old adage of, someone make them, throw them in, and they're either going to sink or swim. Chances are with that expectation, the person's going to sink. We have to have realistic expectations of others. for others. If we hold others to a higher expectation than they can accomplish, then they will, then they're going to fail, and then that will cause us stress. Okay, I was just checking the chat. Okay. Plan your time and organize to reduce stress. I was talking to my girlfriend yesterday, and she was talking about how much stress she has. She's an event planner, and which is a stressful job. But then she was talking about the stress, and she was talking about the clutter she has at her own home. And I had to say, Sally, if you would clean up your own clutter, would you be as stressed about what was work? And she paused and she goes, if someone would clean my clutter for me, or I could get it cleaned up, I think I could handle the stress at work. So plan your time and organize yourself to reduce stress. Because being unorganized, if you're going to do some training and you've downloaded and printed the 890-page Oxman, and then someone comes in for training and you're trying to look for that Oxman and you've lost it, or heaven forbid you didn't put it in a binder and you dropped it and all the pages got messed up. Yeah, you're going to have some stress over that. And then if you have other stress in other parts of your life, it all starts adding up. So being unorganized, procrastinating, poor planning often leads to frustration or even a crisis, and that leads to feeling stressed. This is big for the auxiliary. We should actually do a whole session on how to say no. Learn to say no. How many times and how many here within your flotilla hold multiple FSO jobs? Probably you all could raise your hand. We need to learn to say no and choose the things that we can do and do well, and to say that yes to that. We're protecting ourselves and our health by being able to say no to reduce stress. Okay. All men need leisure. Thomas Aquinas said that. So even back when Thomas Aquinas was alive, they recognized stress. And these are pictures of activities in our division. Okay. Relaxation reduces stress, so make time to play. My husband and I mentioned that we were very active in operations at one time. And when we would get off of work on Friday afternoon, we would leave and go out to the river and patrol. We would either jump on our jet skis or our boat, and we would patrol for the evening. Saturday morning, we would come back and patrol. And Sunday, we would patrol. Until Sunday evening, we would go home and get ready for work. Now, what would happen is those times when we were patrolling, our mind shifted gears. It totally shifted gears, because here's an example. This is a situation where we were a dumb boat for the active duty, and they're towing us. Well, when you're doing things like that, you aren't necessarily thinking about your other work. You've got your mind focused on that patrol and on what's happening. So it forced us to take our mind off of work and put it on something else. And often my husband and I say, both basically for about the 10 years we did that, it kept us sane when we were working because we had that opportunity. Our minds relaxed. Okay. This is another one we're talking about. When you're in a stressful situation, do the deep breathing. After that deep breathing, you might want to imagine of a wonderful place. Here, this beach. Relax your muscles to reduce stress. Close your eyes. Visualize the peaceful setting. Visualize the sounds. Hear the sounds, the smells. Try to picture the sounds and sensations. And continue to do that until you start feeling more relaxed. Okay, Yiddish proverb. What soap is to the body, laughter is to the soul. So try to add laughter into your daily life. You can watch funny movies, a television show, YouTube videos, TikTok kitty cat videos, funny radio shows, funny books. Spend time with people who help you laugh and see the bright side. University of Michigan did some research on humor, and they found that people who, one, had humor in their lives handled stress better. One, they had a lot less, they complained of job stress much less than others did. But also, they had a stronger immune system and their blood pressure went down. And there were a couple other researchers that also did the same experiments and found the same results. So people who are humor oriented in their approach to work feel less stress than others. Okay, now this is a little bit different. Okay, now the Japanese have a little different view of, we all recognize stress, but they have something called Jin Shin Jyutsu, originated in Japan. And it's an ancient practice that focuses on opening up the flow of energy throughout the body and encouraging healing. The hands are thought to be one pathway to relieving different tensions or blockages of energy. Each part of the hand is linked to different emotions, functions, and organs. For example, the ring finger, my ring finger, is believed to be linked to depression, sadness, and decision-making. But the palm is connected to overall happiness. So, to do this exercise, if you're feeling stressed out, you can grab your finger or thumb. So you grab one of your fingers or your thumb with the opposite hand as if you were holding a handle. Hold each finger or thumb for 1 or 2 minutes. You may feel a pulsating sensation. If you're doing it on the palm, use your thumb of your opposite hand and put pressure on the middle of the palm for around a minute. So the Japanese believe that this is a good release. So just something to think about. Okay, now we're going to get to mindfulness. Mindfulness is probably born out of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a therapeutic modality that I use frequently. Oops. And mindfulness is a quality or the state of being conscious of or aware of something. It's a mental state that's achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment while acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations. So mindfulness is basically recognizing how you think and recognizing if you've got negative thoughts. So by being mindful, we recognize our own negative thoughts, and those negative thoughts exacerbate stress, or in the situation of perceived stress, they actually cause stress. But some of the things that could be overthinking problems, recycling thoughts, catastrophizing thoughts. So these are things that are going to help, that can hurt us. So we have to be mindful to try to overcome some of these things. So let's start out by talking about filtering. Okay, and filtering is taking the good aspects of a situation and magnifying the negative aspects. When my cat ate my tuna salad sandwich, I magnified that as a catastrophe. I magnified that. And also that was catastrophizing because it was a catastrophe for me. But an example of something is, let's say you've had a great day you're working on your boat crew qualification. You had a great day. Here I said your coxswain qualification. You completed the coxswain qualification. You were complimented for doing a good job, but let's just say you were corrected when you throttled forward and were going at speed toward another boat when you should have been in idle speed. So then that evening you ruminate and you're thinking constantly about completing your ox-op about worrying about getting your test proctored and so upset that you made the mistake of throttling forward that you cannot think of anything else, even though you completed the qualification. You filter out the good aspects and just think of the negative aspects. That is going to create stress. So mindfulness, the next things we're talking mindfulness, we're going to look at some of these things that we do. And what we have to do is recognize. We have to assess the situation. Am I filtering out anything good that happened? And then you have to look at the whole situation, look at it realistically. Next one, catastrophizing it. So you automatically anticipate the worst will happen without any facts to substantiate your belief. The worst is going to happen no matter what. For example, you believe that QE will never pass you for crew. You can't get into Ox Data to get your orders for an upcoming patrol, and you assume you'll never receive orders. It'll never happen. Someone might say, the world is against me. Have you ever heard anyone say that? Nothing ever goes right for me. That is catastrophizing. So, again, look at your self-talk. What are you saying to yourself? Then, there's nothing that never goes right for anybody. So then you have to stop and think, what is going right? You have to stop yourself from thinking that way. Now, if you notice, I've tried to gear all of these situations toward the auxiliary, but there are a lot of other situations that you may be going through in life. So again, you talk about it. Personalizing. Something bad occurs, you automatically blame yourself. Does anyone do that? It's all thinking it's always my fault. I never can do anything right. Here's in a situation, you were scheduled to go on a patrol with your flotilla friends, but the coxswain canceled the patrol. You assume that the cancellation is because no one wanted to be around you. We actually, years ago, she's not in our flotilla anymore. She's not in the auxiliary anymore, but there was someone in our flotilla who always thought of that. If anything was canceled, she assumed it was because of her. So that would be personalized. You have to realize life happens. Life is going to happen, and sometimes things get canceled, sometimes things get changed. Nothing is constant in life. So you have to, when something bad occurs, do not automatically blame yourself. Just realize it could just happen. Now, if someone comes out and tells you, yeah, we did it because we don't want you around, then that's different. But usually it's not, there's something else. Just ask the person, why did you cancel it? And if they say, because weather was bad, because my boat broke down, because we didn't have enough crew, believe them. Okay. Blaming, you blame someone else is responsible for everything that's happening to you. My toxic boss used to do this. Everything was someone else's fault. It's a form of what they call gaslighting. So don't always blame someone else. Take a look and see who is responsible for something. Again, think. So, for example, you failed to earn a qualification and you blame your mentor rather than assessing whether there was something you could have done differently. You avoid being responsible for your thoughts and feelings. And again, there are people who do that. Okay, negative self-talk, magnifying, making a big deal out of a minor problem. My cat issue was magnifying. Perfectionism. Are you one of the people who have to always be perfect? Have to always be the best? That is going to add an incredible amount of stress. All of these thought processes will increase your stress. So it's impossible, keeping impossible standards and trying to be more perfect than anyone else always sets you up for failure. So to reduce stress, let's change your self-talk, change your attitude. Think of other ways to look at those situations. We cannot control other people. We always have to remember that. We cannot control anybody else. And if we try to control other people, we will end up being stressed. We will end up probably hurting ourselves. The only person we can control is ourselves. The only thoughts that we can control are our own thoughts. So to manage stress with mindfulness, we have to reflect and assess. We have to break down what is causing the stress. Is it a particular project, a problem in the flotilla, overcommitment, a toxic boss, balancing your work life and the Coast Guard auxiliary? So establish the root of the stress that you're feeling. Then reach out. Remember that emotional support system we talked about? Talk to someone about what you're going through and accessing the support that's available. Get that support system in place and utilize it. Lean on them. Ask them to be brutally honest with you. I do that with my husband. Am I overreacting? Am I magnifying this? Am I personalizing this? I ask him regularly, pretty regularly, about these things. And actually, when he actually proofread my PowerPoint, he actually had highlighted and put the things that he thought I did. So he does respond to that. So utilize that. So we want to assess what is causing the stress. After you assess it, plan. You're going to take out all that filtering, all the catastrophizing, magnifying, personalizing, all that. Then you plan what is the best technique to use of the stress management. Okay, I'm stressed out. So am I going to exercise? I know I need the sleep. I know I'm not going to start drinking alcohol. I know that I need to do something. So plan on what you're going to do to eliminate the stress, and then practice those stress reduction techniques. So in summary, stress is normal. It's our body's response to stress. In today's world, we face many stress situations that trigger our stress response. Too much stress can be physically harmful, can lead to burnout. In small doses, experiencing stress can be helpful and promote healthy reactions. It can prepare us for future reactions to situations, but we've got to learn the techniques to manage stress. So stress relief is not something we can afford. It's not something we can afford to put on the back burner. If we deprioritize our rest and relaxation, but continue to pile on stress, sooner or later we're likely to face dire consequences. So all too often, we look to stress relief techniques when we're burned out or exhausted, but by then, stress has already gotten out of control. So let's nip it in the bud. The minute we're starting to feel stress, let's exercise. Let's get enough sleep. Let's lean on our emotional support system. Lean on them regularly. Because nipping in the bud will build positive stress buffering habits, which can ultimately help us avoid reaching the point where it takes a toll on our physical and mental well-being. Okay. Any questions? Comments?
Thank you, Diane. There was a comment from Commodore Formato in the chat box. 2 thumbs up. It's okay to say no. Thank you for that. So
Okay.
You've all heard it here. The NACO is definitely giving us permission to say no.
Mm-hmm.
So any other questions, comments for Diane? Feel free to unmute yourselves, or if you're not comfortable with that, type it in the chat.
Okay.
So Diane, I thought it was
Okay.
for references. Yeah.
I really enjoyed watching the people with their cameras practicing those hand exercises. There were a couple of them.
Well, there might be something to that, because how often do people, like when you get a massage, you want your hand massaged? And so that's sort of the same thing. So I've done that. I use that little technique frequently, and it does help sometimes. It's like, oh, that's relaxing.
Diane, I didn't know all of that about your background, so that was very interesting to learn about your career and
Oh,
your background. So, and this was very good.
oh, well, thank you.
I think of people that I work with that I wish could see this
Oh, yeah.
work. Yeah.
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 Yeah. It is interesting when you work in the mental health field and you're working with a lot of other therapists. It is really interesting because therapists never hold back. The minute they see you doing something you shouldn't be doing, they call you on it. And then everybody tries to use their own therapeutic techniques on you, and you're trying to figure out what they're doing. And it's kind of fun. If you like that sort of thing, it is a fun atmosphere to work in. But you're usually called on that. And Bob, my husband, has learned a lot from me, and now he calls me on things when I do them.
And you wouldn't believe how much trouble I get in when I do. Just kidding.
All right. On that note, before Bob gets himself in even more trouble, thank you,
Thank you, Julie.
thank you everyone for attending and for your participation. Just one real quick announcement before we all log off. Remember, N-Train is coming up in January. There are some C schools that are going on there, including the Part A of Oxlams.
So you talked about it. That's gonna be $100.
Commodore, were you trying to?
Yeah, I'm trying.
Okay. And so if you're wanting to attend one of the C schools, including Oxlams Part A, please be sure to get your short-term training request sent into your district. So those are due here pretty quickly. So,
Okay.
all right. Thank you very much.
Well, and thank you, Julie. So,
Nice job. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much. This was so well presented and so much needed. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.